The Song of the Sacred Tremor. The venerated Shakti, source of energy, opens her eyes and the universe is reabsorbed in pure consciousness. She closes them and the universe is manifested within her. The sacred tremor, the very place of creation and return, is completely limitless because its nature is formless. Even within duality, the Tantrika goes straight to the non-dual source, because pure subjectivity always resides immersed within their own nature. All the relative notions tied to the ego rediscover their peaceful source, deeply buried under all the different states. In the absolute sense, pleasure and suffering, subject and object, are nothing other than the space of profound consciousness. To grasp this fundamental truth is to see absolute freedom everywhere. Thus, the activity of the senses itself dwells in this fundamental freedom and pours forth from it. Therefore, the person who rediscovers this essential sacred tremor of consciousness escapes the dim confusion of limited desire. Liberated in this way from the multiplicity of impulses tied to the ego, one experiences the supreme state. Then the heart realizes that the true innate nature is both the universal agent and the subjectivity that perceives the world. Thus, immersed in understanding, it knows and acts according to its desire. How can this wonder-filled Tantrika, who always comes back to their own fundamental nature as a source of all manifestation, be subject to transmigration? If the void could be an object of contemplation, where would the consciousness that perceives it be? Therefore, consider contemplation of the vacuity as an artifice of a nature analogous to that of a profound absence from the world. Actor and action are united, but when action is dissolved by abandoning the fruits of the act, the very dynamic that is tied to the ego exhausts itself, and the Tantrika who is absorbed in this profound contemplation discovers the divine tremor, liberated from its ties to the ego. The profound nature of action is thus revealed, and one who has interiorized the movement of desire no longer knows dissolution. They cannot cease to exist because they have returned to the profound source. The awakened Tantrika realizes this continuous sacred tremor throughout the three states. Shiva is then in loving union with Shakti in the form of knowledge and its object, whereas everywhere else he is manifested as pure consciousness. The whole palette of the different kinds of sacred tremoring finds its source in the universal sacred tremor of consciousness, and in this way reaches the person. How could such a sacred tremoring limit the Tantrika? And yet, this sacred tremor itself causes people who are subject to limited views to become lost. Because their intuition, being dissociated from the profound source, they throw themselves into the whirlwind of transmigration. The person who with fieriness tends toward the profound sacred tremor reaches their true nature even within activity. The profound and stable sacred tremor can be reached in extreme states: anger, intense joy, mental wandering, or the drive toward survival. When the Tantrika gives themselves over to Shiva and Shakti, the sun and the moon come up in the central channel. At that moment, when in the sky the sun and the moon disappear, the awakened person remains lucid, whereas the ordinary person sinks into unconsciousness. Mantras, when they are charged with the power of the sacred tremor, accomplish their function through the senses of the awakened person. They become united with the mind of the Tantrika, who penetrates the nature of Shiva and Shakti. All things emerge from the individual essence of the Tantrika, who recognizes themselves in Shiva and Shakti. Everything in which one takes pleasure is Shiva and Shakti. Thus, there is no state that can be named that would not be Shiva, Shakti. Always present to the reality that they perceive as the play of their own nature, the Tantrika is liberated at the very heart of life. Through the intensity of the objectless desire, contemplation emerges in the heart of the Tantrika, united to the profound sacred tremor. This is the attainment of the supreme nectar, the immortality of Samadhi, which reveals to the Tantrika their own nature. The ardour toward Shiva Shakti that manifests the universe allows the Tantrika to be fulfilled. Over the course of the dream, the sun and the moon appear in their heart, and all their wishes are granted. But if they are not present, the Tantrika will be wronged by the play of manifestation, and they will experience the illusory state of the aspirant throughout waking and sleeping. Just as an object that escapes attention is more clearly perceived when we make the effort to see it better from all angles, so the supreme sacred tremor appears to the Tantrika when they ardently strive toward it. In this way, everything is in tune with the essence of their true nature. Even in a state of extreme weakness, such a Tantrika succeeds in this accomplishment. Even starving, they find their food. With their only support, the recognition of the heart, the Tantrika is omniscient and in harmony with the world. If the body-mind is ravaged by discouragement due to ignorance, only the completely unlimited expansion of consciousness will dissipate a lassitude whose source will then have disappeared. The revelation of the self arises in the person who is now only absolute desire. May each of us have this experience. Then may light, sound, form, and taste come and impede the person who is still tied to the ego. When the Tantrika pervades everything with their absolute desire, what use are words? They have this experience on their own. May the Tantrika remain present, their senses vigilantly sown in reality, and may they know stability. The person who is deprived of their power by the dark forces of limited activity becomes the plaything of the energy of sounds. Caught in the field of subtle energies and mental representations, the supreme ambrosia is dissolved, and the person forgets their innate freedom. The power of the word is always ready to veil the profound nature of the self, because no mental representation can free itself from language. The energy of the sacred tremor that passes through the vulgar person enslaves them, whereas this same energy liberates the person who is on the path. The subtle body itself is an obstacle that is tied to limited intelligence and to the ego. The enslaved person has experiences that are tied to their beliefs and to the idea that they have of their body, and in this very way perpetuates the tie. But when the Tantrika becomes established in the sacred tremor of reality, they liberate the flow of manifestation and return, and in this way take pleasure in the universal freedom as a master of the wheel of energies. I venerate the spontaneous tremoring and wonderful words of my Master, who had me cross the ocean of doubt. May this jewel of knowledge lead all beings to reach the true nature of reality, and may they keep this jewel in the deepest part of their heart.